It's incredibly hard to believe, but it's almost been 2 years since the Nuggetorium Tough Shed was delivered to my house. It took about 6 months or so for me and my dad, mostly my dad, to build this thing out and finish it out with networking cable and electricity and all the little doodads that you see in it now. So now that I've spent a ton of time in this shed, working on my bikes, live streaming, moving around, having friends over, there are a few little tweaks that I'd like to make. Well, little tweaks and big tweaks that I'd like to make to open the space up, to organize things better, and turn this thing into Nuggetorium 2.0. And we're going to start with my biggest pain point, my big, clumsy, always in the way bike stand. And I really didn't even know that there could be a solution to this problem until I saw Sid's dad, Jim, on the Sid and Mackie channel talking about his really awesome vertically mounted bike stand that goes way up in the air and can go way low. It's 360 degrees. So seeing Jim's project on Sid and Mackie's channel actually sparked my imagination to think, oh, wait, maybe there is some different way to tackle this problem. I told my dad about the idea, and we both spent a few days brainstorming and trying to imagine how we would engineer this thing, and the final product turned out really, really cool. So we started with a very simple concept. You take the business end of a bike stand out of its base, you drill a hole in it, and then you mount it to the wall/ceiling. So I got really lucky with how the Nuggetorium is built, because I have this loft and it's a perfect mounting plate for this bike stand. If you had to do this with just a normal wall or a normal ceiling, it would take a lot more engineering. We got really lucky. So to get started, my dad started drilling holes. Then we screwed in this temporary wood block to be the base mounting point, just to prove that this would work, that everything would swing in the right direction, and that it would be level enough, and that I could actually move around and attach the bike, and that we were going in the right direction. We were both pretty damn happy with the proof of concept, with the beta test, and just loading the bike in, making sure it would fit and swing around, and that the bike wasn't too big and it wasn't in a weird awkward position, because that's the whole thing we're trying to fight, is awkwardness. We're trying to make this so much better and smoother than the other bike stand. To get a flush mounting point, my dad took out this little piece of trim with the jigsaw. I had this piece of scrap lumber in the backyard, so we took the sander, made it really nice, and that is what we're going to use for our mounting plate. So we just put it in place to visually make sure that everything was going to be good to go, and then we started drilling holes. First, we do pilot holes. These are tinier holes just to make it easier for when you start drilling a big hole. And we need some big holes because we're going to use some big bolts on this project. We're going to really anchor this thing in tight and make sure it's super sturdy and that it can hold a lot of weight. So we're going to use some lag bolts to attach this whole thing to the wall. So that means a big old bolt like this is going to go through. We're going to have to drill a hole through the stud in the wall that's up there. And right now my dad is doing this little countersink thing. He's making a shallow hole in the wood, so when you put the bolt head in, the top of the bolt head will sit in flush and nothing will stick out from the wood. And we're totally overbuilding this thing with 4 holes, with 4 bolts. And when you do something like this, see we have a washer on it. You want to make sure you have a washer just to make sure that the head of the bolt doesn't just get pulled through, because you're going to put a lot of pressure tightening these up and putting them in place. We did some more sanding just to make sure all the pencil marks would get cleaned off. Then we opened up the floor in the loft. Luckily, there's really not much up there. It's rough. It's easy to pop that wood off. And just drilled a bunch more holes, 4 more holes, to make sure that the mounting plate would get on there right. Then I just needed to find the right size wrench that would fit the nut that would go on the lag bolt to tighten this whole thing up. So the mounting point is in place. Now we need a hole in the middle that will be the pivot point. This is where the bike stand will hang off of the plate. Pretty quickly, we realized that we needed more than just a pivot point. We needed another hole that we could put a pin in that would lock the bike stand in place and keep it from swiveling around too much. So now we are at the crux of the build. We have the bike stand pivoting. We have it going up and down. It looks good. It feels good. It's holding weight. It's not shaking around too much. But now we have to figure out how to actually store it in the upright position so it is out of the way. So for some reason, I was struck with a bolt of inspiration and I thought of a magnet. What if you could just push the whole bike stand up and a magnet would be able to retain all of the weight? And it just so happened that my dad had a couple of dangerously strong magnets laying around. So he took that little idea and brought it to life and made it work so well. Luckily, the magnet already had a thread on it, so my dad was able to build this little contraption out of wood where you thread a nut into it, and it actually sits in there really tight, but it also sits in there not quite flush, like a little deeper than flush, so the magnet would never actually be physically touching the bike stand and kind of scraping it up. And this is where it all came together. Boom! It actually holds. I was so stoked. We picked a good spot for the magnet, and then we mounted it, screwed it down with some big old screws into the floor of the loft. With the vise of the bike stand pointed down, it is just within my reach. It's totally out of the way. No one's going to hit their head on it, and you can easily reach up, pull it down from the magnet, and swing it into place. Okay, but how strong is this magnet going to be? Is this thing going to fall down on my head? I slapped it around a ton, and it looks pretty damn solid. My dad even came up with a little test for all you haters out there. Look at that! It's like Thor's hammer, and it lifts it up like it weighs nothing. Apparently, my dad is worthy to wield the Molinar. So I do have to get out a step stool to actually secure the stand when it is in its downward mode with the little safety pin that I didn't really do a good job of showing up close. Even with the safety pin inserted, there's still a little bit of slop in the bike stand, and I would love to hear from you guys if you have any ideas how to tighten that up, how to make it a little more rigid in the next version. This is just the 1.0, and I think it came out really, really good. I think my favorite part is not being boxed in, that I can climb under the bike, move around, and get around, and that frigging bike stand isn't in the way, tripping over it. This is so cool, so functional, solving problems and iterating, making the Nuggetorium as good as we can get it. Anybody else out there building stuff in the shed, solving problems, have any ideas for some cool stuff? I'd love to hear them. Leave them in the comments. It's okay if you leave a link. I'll see it in the spam. I always check my comments. I read every one. I appreciate them so much. Here we go. Let's get some more Nuggetorium builds throughout the summer. Thanks for watching, you guys. I'll see you on the trail.